Thank you. Thank you so much, Treasurer Ma and Tammy Bowie. Now to close out our event, we have a panel discussion with our two interviewers, Tammy Bowie and Tammy Tran. They will be joined by Irvine Vice Mayor Tammy Kim, who is a mother, a nonprofit leader, an educator, a community advocate, a small business owner, and former corporate executive who has lived, worked, and raised her son in Irvine for the past 2 decades. She was elected to Irvine City Council in November 2020 in a historic win, beating out 13 other candidates with the highest vote count for any city council candidate in the city's history. The conversation will be moderated by Diana Hwang from the Asian American Women's Political Initiative. Now I'll hand it over to Diana.
Thank you, Nancy. As Nancy said, I'm Diana Hwang. I'm the founder of the Asian American Women's Political Initiative, the country's only political leadership organization for AAPI women. And when I started it, a number of people in the community asked me, why just women? And the conversations we just saw, this panel we're about to jump into now, this is why. So thank you to Justine and Steve and Talia and Farah and Nancy just for your leadership in pulling together events. Events are like no joke. So all the logistics, we just have so much gratitude for you. I just want to say how honored I am to be with you, with these incredible panelists in this incredible space that Cause has created for us to talk about AAPI women in politics, AAPI women in leadership, AAPI women in power. And I'm particularly grateful because spaces like these are a lot more rare than they should be. And so I'm here with you from Boston, where it is 11:56 p.m. right now because I needed this space. And so now we're lucky enough to be able to debrief with the three of you after Tammy Tran and Tammy Bowie's interviews with Congresswoman Kim and Treasurer Ma. So there were a couple of things that resonated pretty deeply with me. In Tammy Bowie's conversation with Treasurer Ma, there was a level of demystifying what it is to run for office and also really honest talk about the unique challenges facing AAPI women candidates. And as part of a heavily immigrant community, AAPI women and men, honestly, weren't raised to brag about ourselves nonstop, which is what you have to do when you run. We weren't raised to ask for money for ourselves. I ran for state senate in Massachusetts in a district that included Boston's Chinatown. And I remember describing to someone how hard it was mentally for me as an AAPI woman to run for office, and raise money. And I gave the example of when my family went out with another family for dinner, we'd be fighting over who should keep the leftovers, right? It's like, no, you keep the leftovers. And they'd be like, no, you keep the leftovers, right? So I would say it was like I went up to the other family and said, so I'm going to take the leftovers and you owe me $1,000, right? And so essentially a lot of your time is spent doing all of these other things you have to do to run a strong campaign, when really I ran because I wanted to fight for Chinatown. And in Tammy Bowie's interview with Treasurer Ma, she essentially said that women who run for office, it often takes a long time to convince them to run. And then when they ultimately do, they really don't run for power, they run for our community and to make a difference. So Vice Mayor Kim, does that resonate with you? Could you talk a little bit about how you came to run for office and what got you to make that jump?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here with all of you. So, I mean, it's not a simple story because it's actually, starts from just my upbringing and my roots, being born in Korea and coming here as a child, from Korea with my parents, growing up in the East Coast in Flint, Michigan, and then in Baltimore, like so many immigrant families at that time, growing up, we struggled. My parents, my mom was a seamstress, and then my dad was a day laborer, and eventually they saved up to have a small business. But what that meant was that they worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week with no health insurance, no means of retirement savings, just in order to provide enough for my family and myself, my siblings. I eventually became the first person in my family to go to college. And then came out to California in my early 20s and moved my way up through the corporate ladder in various tech companies, eventually becoming the first Asian American female vice president of talent acquisition for a Fortune 500 company. And why I mention that is because I had aspirations to go to Washington. I had aspirations to, I studied public policy. I didn't have the means to have an internship and to do an internship, because to do an internship means I couldn't work at my parents' store. And they wouldn't have been able to go to the doctor because I wasn't working at their store, and then have my own job so I could put myself through college. And I needed to provide for myself and for my family. And that's really what it came down to. So I really put aside the community work that I wanted to do in order to work my way up the corporate ladder. So after having a successful corporate career and being able to lift up my family, I chose to pay it forward by investing my own resources in starting a nonprofit organization here in Irvine called the Korean American Center. And I started that as a way to reclaim our heritage as Korean Americans. And then we merged with Korean Community Services, a federally qualified healthcare center, eventually becoming one of the largest Asian American serving organizations in Orange County, and the primary social service agency for the over 100,000 Korean Americans in Orange County. And some of our programs includes pro bono immigration assistance, community wellness, mental health programs, Medicaid enrollment, language access, as well as being the primary care provider for the uninsured, the underinsured, and the DACA recipients. I also do a lot of community service. I was chair of the Language Access Committee for the Orange County Register of Voters, and did a whole lot of advocacy work. So my role and why I ran, and I give you all of that background, is because I wasn't running for myself. It was really to run for my community, to provide a voice to the voiceless, because there aren't enough people, and there aren't enough Asian Americans, and there certainly are not enough Asian American women, and then albeit progressive Asian American women, to run for office. And the fact that I was entrenched in our community and worked as a political operative here in Orange County, being part of the Democratic Party, understanding sort of the mechanisms and understanding sort of the machine behind the machine behind the machine, and having that knowledge really set me up to be able to run for office. I did not want to run for office. And many people can tell you, I was trying to look for the right candidates to run for office, and then supporting those people. And then it was just over and over again, it was, no, you should run. You are the one that should run for office. And finally, enough crazy people convinced me that, and that's what happened. So that is it in a nutshell. And there's obviously more to it and fill in the gaps, but it was really a means in order to help continue to advocate for our community.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that, Vice Mayor. And that's why Treasurer Ma was like, Tammy Bowie, just saying, you're up next, okay? Because women have to be asked. Women always look to someone else, but we are the leaders we are looking for. So we're really grateful that you got dragged kicking and screaming into running so that you are now Vice Mayor.
Well, it's also the other thing, just to add, it's please. The feeling of being unqualified. And that's that is the main thing, because I always thought I was not qualified.
And I think there's this thing that like this idea that imposter syndrome goes away, and it really never does, right? Like it really never does. And it's like the idea that being brave is not feeling that way, but doing it anyways, right? So no, completely. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Tammy Bowie. You just, first of all, please run. Okay, I'm the second one to ask after Fiona just in this panel. But you just have experience in like everything, in corporate philanthropy, in higher education, in a number of roles in the state legislature, and now in the private sector as senior government affairs manager for Turo. So first, tell us about that path. Treasurer Ma was like, her parents wanted her to be a doctor, lawyer, engineering, accountant, and didn't want her to run because of the unknown and instability. And you created your own path and must have also taken your parents on a bit of a roller coaster ride. So if you could just tell us how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. And I also have to say, the imposter thing, you're right, it doesn't go away. But one thing that helps, I think, is having people like Vice Mayor Kim or Tammy Tran or you or people at cause to remind you, what we are capable of, right? So I would say, don't underestimate, the people that you surround yourself with, and how when you are in doubt and you don't feel qualified or whatever that may be, the way to get through it is to have people tell you, no, you got this. You need to do it. So that's the first thing I would say, because you may never get over it. But if you have people who believe in you, you owe it to yourself and to them to do it. So, something that the vice mayor just said totally resonated with me. I was born in Vietnam. My parents and I were refugees. I was 7 months old when literally my dad got us on a boat, a rickety old boat. And, we arrived with the sponsorship of a family in Santa Ana in Orange County. So I share that to say, I think our story as Asian Americans and our path is an amazing one. And I think it inspires so many of us to do things because it's not about us, right? It's not about me. And when I am looking for a job and I have my parents who have talked to me about these careers that are much more stable in nature, they're not doing it to be selfish, right? They're doing it because they sacrificed a whole lot, right, for us to get here. And so I felt the weight oftentimes of choosing a more understandable career, right? Because they wanted to be able to tell whether it's relatives in Vietnam or, family and friends, like, this is what my daughter does. Well, unfortunately, I don't think they ever have been able to do that. But I will say this, Diana, at the end of the day, I think culturally, that's why this muscle of that's why I brought up the formal versus informal, right? Because I think culturally as Asian Americans, we value education, right? We value, where did you go to school? How many degrees you have? To this day, I have a bachelor's, that's it. But you know what else I have? I have a whole lot of experience. I have a whole lot of people who have helped me, who have paved the path for me, right? And I know a whole lot more than the white male who is willing to just say whatever comes out of his mouth. And when I was younger, I used to think, oh, I have to plan out my arguments. And, I was afraid to ask for things because I thought it was just too much. And I didn't grow up having we did not have conversations. My parents talked to me. They did not ask me for my input. And so these things that I think culturally we grow up with do not set us up for this type of kind of battlefield that we're in, whether it's politics or corporate work culture. But I think politics is all around us. And I think one thing to keep in mind is, you heard the treasurer say that, work on your resume, work on the other thing I would add, it's the informal, it is the endorsement of individuals like Vice Mayor Kim or the, Tammy Tran knows everybody. So, I have a story and I'll close this up, which is that, I'm at Turo now because one day while I was sharing with her that I was, getting ready to move up north, I was at Cal State Fullerton and Tammy said, oh, have you heard of Turo? And then it turned out I knew somebody, we knew somebody at Turo. And then I also knew another person at Turo. And that happened because Tammy put that bug in my ear, right? And actually, I met Vice Mayor Kim when I was at Cal State Fullerton, and I remember, you know, when I was younger, I was telling you how I used to be nervous about asking for things, right? I think we have to shift our mindset from asking to we add value when we come to the table with recommendations because we have experience. And companies need that. They need diverse perspectives. And if you come from a background where you can speak from that experience, you are not asking for anything. You are imploring them to do what they need to do. And so Vice Mayor Kim at that time came out and met with the president at the time at Cal State Fullerton, because Korean Americans make up a large community in the city of Fullerton. And so my younger self would have been like, oh, am I asking too much to like have, you know, the president meet with this community person? You know, my associate VP self at that time said, he is so lucky he gets to meet with Vice Mayor Kim. She wasn't the vice mayor then, but how fortunate that he already developed a relationship before she became vice mayor. So I hope that answers your question, but I do think it's so magical how our paths always all seem to intersect.
No, Tammy, you just went in so many places. I was like, where do I go with you? I mean, one of the things that I would say that I've learned too is that like relationships are everything, right? And I think and it's who you meet along the way and those relationships along the way that continue to propel you forward, right? So I think one of the questions I had for Tammy Tran is, so me and my best friend, who also started a political nonprofit, we send back and forth a screenshot of a card that says, behind every great woman is another great woman replying to a frantic text in the middle of the night, right? Which is pretty much the truest thing I've ever freaking heard, okay? And honestly, some of what you had said, Tammy Bowie, like the way that I make it through all the tough times and the self-doubt and the imposter syndrome is surrounding myself by people and by people who I've honestly met in spaces like these, right? In politics and the work we do, that's what actually gets me through. So Tammy Tran, can you talk a little about, and this is our last question before we open it up so all of the fellows can ask, but can you talk a little bit about what gets you through the tough times and what can be a kind of a dog-eat-dog world of politics and sometimes in corporate as well?
No, absolutely. And it's everything that you all have said. Have a Tammy in your corner. Luckily for me, I have a Tammy Kim, a Tammy Bowie, a Tammy Tumbling. But joking aside, I think that's so important. Exactly what you said. We don't do these things by ourselves, right? We didn't get to where we are by ourselves. Our parents didn't raise us by themselves, right? And so I feel like that's something that, you know, for those that are following today that are part of the Leadership Institute, I mean, you are not by yourself. You're part of a cohort. You're part of the cause family. And I think that's something that you always have to remember every decision you make, every time you show up on a virtual screen or on a stage, or you walk into a room asking for money for your campaign, or you're looking for that next job or that opportunity. You're not alone. You can't do anything alone. Tammy and I think I remember, I think all of our different career moves have been tied to each other in some way. Either I call her for advice or she pointed me in the right direction to somebody that helped me. And I feel like that's something that we all, you know, that's how you get through things, right? And then it's also something that's a passion for all of us is to bring other people along the way. I mean, Tammy Kim talked about how people convinced her to run. And, you know, not only is she running, she's also talking about getting other people to run. And that's something she and I will randomly call each other like, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get the money to do this? How are we going to get people to do this? And I think that's what drives us. You know, at the end of the day, we all have our day jobs, but what is amazing is that this kind of, you know, I don't know, common thread that runs through all of us, right? That we want to do something for others because others have done that for us. Like I am fully aware every single day, I'm not here because of just me alone. Obviously, you know, I worked hard, you know, I made my parents proud, but also because of people like Tammy Bowie and Tammy Kim and Charlie Wu and others and so many people, and especially the younger people too. Nowadays, now that I'm 40 officially, because last year I didn't get to turn 40, because of pandemic, everything stopped, right? So I think about my kids. I think of my daughter who's 7 years old. I think about the young people that go through the cause program, and we were all there once, right? And there were several people, many people that took the time to talk to us, that took the time to introduce us to somebody. And I think about my years, nothing would have happened had it not been for someone, you know, and many times API, right? Or a person of color. So I don't think I would have to struggle to think about what white male person really went out of the way to help me. But I think it's all been people of color. And I think that's why programs like this is so important. And the main thing is we have to stay connected, because you never know how conversations or how someone within our networks can help us get to the next level or help someone else, right? And then ultimately make a big difference, you know, in the things that we care about, whether it's stopping Asian hate or more API representation. You know, there's so many things that are very lofty and broad, but at the end of the day, it's about the connections and how do we leverage those connections.
Thank you so much for that, Tammy. Just to like, it's the day-to-day, it's the person, like that's how you make this broad change.
Yes.
So fellows, it's your turn. Do you have questions for these three incredible women? And it can range. I mean, if not, I've got like 12 more questions, so I could just take over, but I'm giving everyone a shot here.
It looks like Jen is ready for a question. You want to go ahead, Jen?
Yes, thanks so much. Thanks for everyone. Loved it. I have a question for Vice Mayor Tammy Kim, who I'm obsessed with, Irvine represent. But a question for you, because I mean, I actually told all my pod group this already, that I had never really been involved in politics until I started phone banking for you and Farrakhan and Irvine. But one thing that I noticed now that I've actually been watching city council meetings is you really have to do it all. Like every issue, like every little complaint that or passion area that a resident has, like you have to deal with it. And I was wondering if you could just talk through, like, how do you prioritize the issues that you want to work on? Like, is it, you know, even before the campaign, like you knew what your passion areas were and you really kind of focus on that? Is it you just follow the political environment and you think about what can you move the needle on? Is it depending on how many complaints you get from city? There's a lot of Irvine drama. So like, I was just wondering, how do you just decide and what to focus your limited time on?
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny because at the municipal level, like you've got so many like watchdogs and so many different like really hyper local groups who are like watching your every move at every time. So that's an interesting thing versus Congress or, you know, in the state legislature. So, but in terms of priority, you know, I have a list and set of priorities that are important to me and what I hope to move the needle on. And also the immediate things that I was able to do the moment I was elected was to really fill voids that I saw and noticed as it pertained particularly to the API community. Number one, that of language access. That number two, diversity in hiring within not only our city, but with the Irvine Police Department, and making sure that we have a community that we have a police department and a public safety department that reflects our community. Another thing that I did, again, right off the bat, my first real city council meeting was to make sure and mandate that the city of Irvine kept track of hate crimes and hate incidents that were happening, particularly against the API community, because they were not keeping track of that. So these were things that would not have happens because you have that representation and you have that passion for the community to make things happen. So, you know, you tackle off those priorities in the voids that like the gaping voids. And then you work towards, you know, there's things that are going to be a lot more longer term. Like I cannot find a, you know, immediate solution to our affordable housing crisis or sustainability, but you work on those bit by bit to make sure that things can happen incrementally. So for example, when there's a land use opportunity and you're talking to a developer around land use, then you can push that person or that developer into creating more affordable housing opportunities. And you know, and to your other point, yes, there are a myriad of things that one must really pay attention to. And, you know, when it comes to federal versus the things that you worry about at the state, I mean, at the local level, yes, I get hate mail around potholes and stop signs. And that's, I mean, people are very passionate about it. And what I need to do is I need to figure out how we're going to get a stop sign when you've got lots of residents or potholes or trees or barking dogs or, you know, noisy cars. So, yep, I deal with all of that, you know, plus the bigger issues and everything in between. But, you know, the thing is, when you really like what you're doing and you're really passionate about your community, it's okay. Fun is maybe not the right word, but you have a sense of fulfillment. And that's what I have. And that's what keeps me going. And that's what keeps me motivated. And that's what keeps me going here. And, you know, I had a city council meeting that didn't end until 11:30 last night. And then I showed up at a 7:30 a.m. Rotary meeting because I was a guest speaker at 7:30 this morning for breakfast. And then I'm here now, but it's because of just the passion that I have to serve. And you have to have that. Versus whether you're an introvert, extrovert, because trust me, I have my moments of K-drama too, which is every day, that I just cuddle and watch K-dramas. And I have moments of being an introvert, but it's really about just wanting to serve. And that's what it comes down to. Not wanting to be a politician. I don't want to be a politician, but I do want to serve.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thanks, Jen. And by the way, Jen is one of my appointees because that is what you do. You help bring people up. You help bring your community up by giving them appointments. So I can go on and I'll just stop right there.
Thank you, Jen, for that question. And thank you for serving. Marlena, you're up next. And then we have time for one more question. So if anyone else wants to close us out, but Marlena, take it away.
Marlena.
Hi, it's nice to see you again. When I heard you were going to be on the panel, I was like, oh, yeah, cool. So my question is for anyone and everyone, any of the panelists, kind of around this idea of developing thick skin. So I've been through like some NWPC trainings as someone who does want to run for office at some point. And, you know, they tell you when it comes to the nasty comments and the kind of some of the things that Tammy Kim, that you were kind of referencing, the angry emails and things like that, like how do you develop thick skin in any kind of professional setting, whether it's politics or in the corporate world? You know, how do you do that? And kind of what you touched on, Tammy, is, you know, what do you tell yourself to keep yourself going?
I'll answer that just real quick. And by the way, this panel should have been retitled the Tammy panel, because you have like we might be Guinness Book of how many Tammys on one panel. Just,
you know, I'm the odd one out. Like, I'm like, could you not find a moderator named Tammy? Like that was a cause fail. Go ahead. Sorry.
But yeah, so developing the thick skin, I think developing thick skin is important throughout your career. So in a professional capacity, especially, you know, I worked with a lot of men. I worked with all white men, and that was my entire career. In technology, primarily revenue generating positions like chief revenue officers and all those customer facing people. It's like a fraternity, but that's a different story for a different time. And you develop thick skin there, but the political realm is a completely different animal, and you just have to tune it out. If you get stuck in social media and you read every Facebook comment, you will be in a world of depression. And every hate email you get and everything that says go back to China, go back to North Korea, which I've gotten, you have to let it go. And you have to go through that exercise in your own mind to be able to let it go, because that is the hardest part, especially in local politics, where things get so personal so fast. And you have to put yourself in a almost like a Zen-like mental state, and put a shield on, because it will happen. And I would say it's that two things: fundraising, thick skin. Those are the two things in politics, especially at the local level, that you have to develop. And I'll let one of the other, either TT, which we call Tammy Tran, or Bowie, if you guys have any thoughts on that.
And it's an politics. I mean, it's a question that obviously politics is the most outward facing, right? But I think it's a good question for just all of the careers that you are in. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Vice Mayor said and add just two other thoughts. One is that, Marlena, that's awesome that you want to run for office. Two, I would say, developing thick skin is also more about knowing what you stand for, right? So no matter what happens, you know why you're going to run for office, and you know what you stand for. So I am sure, like Vice Mayor Kim is talking about, she gets, whether it was her own family who questioned her decision, or, or other people who say, why are you there? I should be there, right? That is going to happen all the time. But I think, Marlena, whether it's for political office or for positions, if you do not believe in yourself first and foremost, why should anybody else? So when you're asking for money, and you're coming from a place of, like Vice Mayor Kim is saying to herself, she is not doing this to be a political figure, right? She is doing this on behalf of her community. So I think kind of reshifting how we think of this. I mean, it's really an act of sacrifice, frankly, for people to run for office, because she's up at 7:30. She's doing this now. We only all have 24 hours in a day. And so I feel like if you can spend the time knowing what you stand for, then you have to be your own biggest fan, right? That's how I see it. So I think the antidote to the ability to develop thick skin, can also just come from you believing that you've got what it takes. Even if sometimes you have bad days, you have to know what you stand for.
And I think it's also back to some of the things we were talking about earlier, right? Like, behind every great woman is another great woman who frantically asks your test. Like, you have to surround yourself by support, because you're going to have a low day. It's just going to happen, right? And what are those things that you do in those moments? And it's remind yourself about why you're doing it, right? Like, I had someone once tell me that you have to have a fire in the belly in order to run, because it's going to be so hard. You're going to be tired. You're asking everyone for everything. The one thing, you have to just be very grounded in why you're doing it. And also surround yourself by people who you can like literally go cry to, and then wipe your tears, and then go an event and be on, right? So I think it's a number of tools, and like, we're all human. I think the best way I describe running for office now is you have to be vulnerable to connect with people, but you're also a thing, right? And the thing is the hate mail and the, right? like you're not human, you're not. So, but it's developing these tools and like a community who will lift you up, and friends who will be there for you. So I know Annie may have a question, and Tammy Tran, hopefully you can jump in and answer it for her if she's still interested. Yes, Annie? No,
yeah,
Annie?
hi.
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to stay off of video because my connection is extremely bad. But yeah, so thank you to all the Tammys. I really appreciated everything that you guys mentioned. But I think one of the things that really resonated with me was what Tammy and Bowie mentioned in terms of, when you're about to ask for something and you're doubting whether you should because it may be too much, it's really, you have to kind of recalibrate yourself and say, no, it's about us adding value. It's not us asking for favors. And I'm just wondering, like, I think being in the politics field for a while, you start to learn about those things, but then you get into these moments where you start doubting yourself.
Absolutely.
And so I was just wondering, when you're in that situation, to all the Tammys, when you guys are in those situations, like, what do you do? At what point did you feel that you weren't doubting? Like, did you ever get to that point? Or is it that, you just go through these phases?
Hi, Annie. I see a lot of Orange County folks on here, so so shout out to our Orange County friends. I think the doubt, I think we talked about this about imposter syndrome. It doesn't go away, right? The doubt doesn't go away. In fact, we doubt ourselves because we strive for perfection. We strive for excellence. And so I think the key thing is, and what I've learned, I mean, I'm naturally an introvert, and I'm going to do a quick plug here. Tammy Bowie and I have a podcast called Women in Power series. It's called the Leap Podcast.
Yes, we named the series after the podcast. This is amazing.
Yes,
Sorry, go ahead.
yes, exactly. I feel like it goes back to what we've been talking about. You're not alone. You can't be alone. Nobody gets anywhere by themselves. The moment you doubt something, you better have 5 or 6 other people, or at least one person that you call to kind of talk through that. And so what you need to do, Annie, or what we all need to do is to, whenever we have that doubt, pick up the phone and call it Tammy. So call me, or call me Tammy Bowie, or call Tammy Kim. Like, that's what we need to do. I have doubted myself. There are days I still do. And I'll send a text, and things like that. And the other thing is to support other women. I think, and this is where I'm just grateful for the friendships I have, is, you want to be vulnerable. You want to make sure that you talk about what you're worried about, the things that you want to do. You share it with your network, and people will step up for you, even without you asking. And I think that's what I think about is there have been plenty of people that have stepped up for me that I know have had my back when I'm not in the room. And so then what I do is I do the same for other women, even women I meet for the first time, just by way of introduction. I know this person is connected to Tammy or connected to Nancy or whoever it is. I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to support that person however I can. And you never know how you can do that, by facilitating an introduction or singing someone's praises. And so, Annie, you know what I'm talking about, right? We all doubt ourselves, but we need to make sure that we voice that doubt, right? And don't keep that to ourselves.
Thank you, Tammy. Because I think there is always this perception that confident appearing women just like have no doubts, right? And I think that's not honest, right? And so I think it's, yeah, go ahead, Tammy.
I bet everybody's nodding as we're talking about these things, right? We've all been there. This is nothing new, and this is not something that will go away, right? So I feel like give voice to that doubt and make sure that you have someone that will hear you, right? And make sure that you surround yourself with people that will not only hear you out, but will help you walk you through that. I mean, I think all of us on the screen have had doubts. We continue to have doubts, but we also are very confident in the fact that we have people that will, take our calls, will answer our texts, will be there and have our backs when we're not in the room.
And honestly, I would prefer to be friends and work with and elect someone who has doubts than a narcissist who walks around thinking they're like walking on water, right? Like, I think it's the vulnerability and those doubts actually make us better. So don't also feel that it's something you need to get rid of, I think, is also the thing. So thank you to the three of you.
I just have one thing to add about doubt, self-doubt. And the imposter syndrome is so real. And I just want to give us an example of what happened. I mean, I doubt myself a lot, so no surprise. I think many of us do. But when I won my election, I thought perhaps, did the registrar of voters make a mistake? I literally thought that. And I thought, am I supposed to be here? And this is, I mean, so we all experience this to different degrees at every time.
Thank you for sharing that, because honestly, right, like you're vice mayor, you can't possibly have any doubts. So, so thank you for that. And just she didn't, clearly, thank God she didn't. But so I'm just gonna hand it back to Nancy. I want to thank the three of you. It's been really energizing for me just to be in this space with you and kind of just taking your sisterhood. So thank you for this. Thank you to Cause and the staff, and go for it, Nancy.